There are a lot of good people out there working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're in laboratories, they're in different countries, in different universities. I've never thought about seaweed as a source for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But when you feed cattle seaweed, their emissions go down 82%. So we're going to be in conversation today to talk about what it means to know this and then shake the world like at its core and say, guys, let's do this. This is going to make a huge change. Ermias Kebreab is the Associate Dean of Global Engagement in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at UC Davis. Okay, he's on the front lines of this. He's the guy that got the award for this. He knows how to do this. And what do you do when you know something can reduce the gas emissions of cattle, which their role in greenhouse gases is so egregious, and I know we're going to talk about that. But what does it feel like to know this, and then how do you get the world to adopt this change on a massive scale? What do? Do you start small? Do you make friends with a cattle guy in Montana and say, can you try this? Like, what's that look like? So we're going to start looking at not only this solution, but how Ermias decides what to focus on as a scholar. Because you have a lot of different directions to go when you're looking at the science of sustainable agriculture and animal science and the overlap there, and how do you make decisions about where to get grants and where to put the money and the focus to make real change in your lifetime. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. Ermias Kebreab, welcome to Swell. I know I'm looking at your website right now, and you are a very busy human being. And I'm just in awe of your expertise, and I'm in awe of your focus. Ermias has a PhD in ecological modeling from the University of Reading, UK. He has an MS in integrated biology. He's got a BS in biology from the University of Asmara. He is from Eritrea. I want to learn all about your journey from Eritrea to UC Davis. So welcome to Swell. I guess I want to start with the idea of seaweed and take us to the moment that you made that a focus of your work, and then we'll go from there. Welcome to Swell.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for inviting me to discuss this issue with you. It's been the focus of my work for several years now. And the reason that I arrived in this is trying to find a solution to reduce enteric methane emissions. So we know that enteric methane emissions are the primary contributor in livestock production systems to climate change. So if we are going to do something about reducing the impact of livestock production on climate, then we need to do something about reducing enteric methane emissions. So these are the emissions that come from the animals themselves, from the metabolism that's happening, from the breakdown of the fiber, and the microbes, the methanogens, use some of the substrates such as hydrogen and carbon dioxide that are byproducts of fermentation, and use them as energy and convert them to methane. So it is a microbial natural process, but unfortunately it has a huge impact on the climate. So I've been working on this issue for quite a while now, but about 10, 15 years ago, the focus was mostly to try to understand what factors impact methane emissions. What are the sort of ingredients, what can we do in order to be able to understand and reduce these emissions? And we were building mathematical models, and that sort of helped us to predict what will be the emissions. And a lot of it was to do with the amount of feed the animals are consuming and the type of feed the animals are consuming. So we realized that if you give more highly fibrous substrates, such as grass and hay and all that, the breakdown of those substrates requires certain bacteria to produce as a byproduct hydrogen, and that hydrogen is then picked up by methanogens, and then you have an increased amount of methane. So that's what we've been trying to then address it, and trying to see if we can change the diet, make it a little bit less fibrous, then perhaps we can reduce the methane emissions. But unfortunately, that's only maybe 5 to 10% reduction you can get that way. And also, the benefit of ruminants is that their niche is to convert fiber that we humans cannot, or even non-ruminant animals convert into high protein food. So we were going to be going against what was intended for ruminants to help us increase the amount of food available by converting grass and hay and byproducts and convert it into animal source food. So maybe about 5-6 years ago, there was this idea of not really changing the diet per se, but providing feed additives, and those feed additives could then reduce emissions without having to change the diet. And so some research was being done. A lot of it was done in vitro, which is just in the lab. And in the lab, there are a number of things that show a reduction of methane emissions. But unfortunately, it doesn't always translate into when you do it in vivo work or in real animals. There were things like curry, for example, that showed reduction of methane emissions, but unfortunately, once the animals start consuming it, the microbial community adapt to it very quickly. So the impact in terms of reducing the methane emissions was not that much. And then I saw this work that was done in Australia, where they looked at a number of different types of seaweed that was present in the coast of Australia, and they found that just one of those, Asparagus taxiformis, a red seaweed, was able to almost completely eliminate methane emissions when they included it at about 2% of the substrate that they were using. So that was quite interesting, and I wanted to see if that will actually work in real animals. I looked at the mode of action. It seems like it would work in ruminants, but at that time, this was maybe 5-6 years ago, I didn't have the funding to be able to do that. So I was approached by John Salwan, who...
Ermias, you just got cut off at the good part as these swells are 5 minutes, so I'm going to let you reply, continue in the conversation, because what's really compelling to me, and probably a lot of people listening, is the idea that when you discover a real turnaround moment, when you say, wow, we've tried these things, but the metabolism adapts and things go back to where they were, but seaweed seems to hold the system and reduce the methane. Where are you right now in the conversion process? So you've experimented, you see that this is possible. How does this information get communicated out into the system? And do you have pilots to show this so you can turn around to big ag or get big agriculture and say, here, let's do this. It's not going to cost you anything more, or indeed it does, and here's how we're going to supplement that. What are the economics behind the shift? Whether or not the seaweed comes in a full new food form, or whether or not it's going to be an additive. How do you work with the economics of that, as well as the evangelizing of that to people that have done the same thing for 200 years? And thank you so much for spending time explaining this to us, because I think from the lab to the field is really a huge journey, and I know you're probably uber sensitive to that. So appreciate your insight into this.
Apologies for being cut off. This is my first interview and discussion. To continue our discussion, then once we take it out of the lab and looking it into real animals, the systems are a little bit different, because we can't really replicate exactly what's going on in the cow's stomach. So that's why we see sometimes different results in the lab as well as with real animals. So once it goes into the animals and we see that there is actually a significant impact that has been shown not just in our lab but also elsewhere, and in Australia and in Europe, also within the U.S. and at Penn State and other places. And so now what happens after that is really to take it into the market. And usually that involves having startup companies being formed and attracting funding to continue this kind of work. And this has happened with the seaweed. There are at least 2 companies in the U.S. that are doing this. So 2 startup companies that are taking this charge and trying to get the seaweed into a commercial arena. And both of them have been quite successful in getting investments from private or government as well. So this kind of work is continuing. As a researcher, I'm interested in trying to answer questions that they may come up with, but ultimately it's those companies that will take it into the market and identify some of the work that needs to be done and identify the right people to do this kind of work, because we've shown that it works in the animals, but there are other issues that needs to be addressed. And if there is any impact on the environment, any impact on human health, on animal health, all of these things have to be done, and it's best done by different researchers around the world. So I believe that this is happening at the moment. So these funds, the funds that they raise, will help them identify the right people to ask those questions and make sure that they get the right answer. So one of the questions is, how do you scale up the seaweed production? So I believe they're working with scientists, marine biologists that understand more about how to grow seaweed and how to maintain sort of the active ingredients within seaweed. And then the next phase will be, okay, then how do you harness all this and put it into a product form that you can distribute easily to farmers as well. So my part really stops at the animal level. So once we show that it works, then the startup companies will take it over, and usually the scientists will be involved as somebody who gives advice on things and how things should be done, and help identify who would be the right person to do the different type of work. So this is the same in all different categories of feed additives. So I'm talking about seaweed here, but there are a number of others that are also show promise. And in my lab, we are not looking just at seaweed, we're looking at different solutions. We've done maybe 8 or 9 different feed additives, some with good success, some not so much success, and some maybe even increase emissions. So this is the way that research works. Is we try to find different solutions, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And the one that has potential, then we push it forward, and people will look into it and take it forward. And right now we are trying to develop a new way of looking at things, and maybe looking at the microbiome, the microbes themselves, and can we influence them and be able to reduce emissions that way as well. And other ways also, including genetics, by selecting animals that are inherently have a lower methane emissions. Those are also the kind of things that can be done. So ultimately, by combination of genetics and nutrition and feed additives, we can arrive into a situation where we are almost close to eliminating enteric methane emissions.
Oh my gosh, I love how positive you are in that last section there about hopefully eliminating these emissions. What I find so fascinating from a layperson's perspective is how cross-pollinated your work really is, and how you are part of a large conversation about how to integrate these discoveries into the food chain, literally and metaphorically. And I do think as a society, we're getting more in touch with what the microbiome is, even for our own guts, and we're learning about that. And I'm just fascinated by it's the nature of research is once you discover something, you push to the next place, but you're always there to help those out in the field who are applying some of your discoveries into action, and they're coming back to you and they're saying, hey, this is working, this is not working. but it's the fine tuning that fascinates me. Whether it's in the food they eat or in the kinds of meat they're choosing to process, the kinds of animals they're choosing to grow, and it's always the end user that determines so much, because this is all about money in the end. People are demanding a certain amount of food, amount of meat, and the agriculture industry is responsive to that. But I do wonder how much we can shift and change the plates on the kitchen tables by offering up better solutions to protect the environment. I know that's the biggest struggle. I want to talk with you about the future of your work. What kinds of people are entering into the field of animal science, especially now? There's so much to consider about the future of animal science and of bioethics, and you can't remove it from the trends of people saying, wow, if we didn't eat so much meat, we wouldn't have this problem. As a professor in the classroom as well as in the lab, what kind of questions are you hearing people ask about their own futures as scientists? And what do you encourage people to focus on? And if you were talking to someone right now who is listening to this, who is considering this field, can you give a sense of a future and what you're looking forward to and what's exciting, and how you're encouraging people to stay open and stay excited about the possibilities without looking at the roadblocks and the politics and the limitations of money, perhaps? But what's your take on the future, and how would you speak to a future scientist who is considering this field?